Hello Potters! Look at this treasure that I've got from Potclays. Each one of these is a 1 kilogram bag of clay, and that's their sample bags which you can order from them really cheaply. It's probably the most affordable way of testing out different clays and finding the right clay for you. Because every clay feels different, it fires different, and glazes work different on each clay too. And that's because of the chemicals inside the clay. So if one's got lots of iron oxide in, it's going to be a bit browner when you fire it in an electric kiln. So I'm going to show you how many pots I can throw with just one bag of clay from one of these sample bags. What I need to do first is find my pottery wheel. I think it might be in here somewhere. Let's find out. Ta-da! Here is my pottery wheel. But I also throw in a very small wheel that you can also buy from Potclays. So maybe it would be better for me to show you how many pots I can throw with a 1 kilogram bag on a small ceramics wheel. So, here it is. I'm going to throw it on this tiny wheel. So I'm going to show you with one kilogram bag how many pots I can throw. And that's probably the most affordable way for any small potter to try a new clay and see which one works best for them, because every potter has a different favourite clay. So today I'm going to throw with an oxidising St Thomas, which is a great clay. St Thomas comes in white and oxidising, so this one will be slightly darker once it's fired, a bit more buff, and the white one gives a really nice white colour. So this is your 1 kilogram here, clay in here, and you can see I don't wedge my clay. It comes so nicely out the bags from Potclays that I just go straight in with the wheel. Yes, air bubbles can cause trouble, but if you centre correctly and make that unicorn horn and then go back down, I find that any air bubbles just get squidged straight out. So, 1 kilogram of clay, one small wheel. How many pots will we be able to throw? And I'm going to throw one functional thing as well. So I'll throw a cup on here, I'll throw a bowl, and then I'll throw some vases too. And we'll just see how many I can build up on the front of the bigger wheel here. So on the small wheel, check that it's working, super duper. And I might speed this bit up, but let's start with a nice vase.
Actually, I just decided I'll talk you through this first throw.
Bit of water. And then coning down, centering down rather, I always centre from top down. So just working my way from the top, and you can see I've got one finger resting on the top, down to the base. And then once more.
Screaming's optional.
All the way down to the base. And then I'm going to do the unicorn horn. So, like you'd squeeze a tube of toothpaste, I'm just squeezing at the base, and then I'm slowly bringing my fingers up. And do not worry about that wobble, that is what we're going to actually push out of the clay now. So gently squeezing, can you see the wobble is starting to disappear, and I'll get it into a bit more of a functional shape. There we go, and that wobble is just where I'm taking my hand away. So if I do it very slowly, you can see, hopefully, that it doesn't wobble. But if I go in too fast with my hand, or if I come away too fast with my hand, that wobble is going to stay. So just move very slowly, almost robotically, and let the wheel do a full rotation every time you move your hand, and you'll find that the wobble gets centred down. And now we're going down, so going down, don't do it too fast. You'll feel the clay kind of move as you go, until you get kind of a Tunnock's tea cake shape, and that's the centred piece of clay that I'm then going to turn into a vase. So then I finger in, and 99% of the time while I'm fingering in, I also knock the pot off centre. So don't really worry too much if you don't start with a perfectly centred pot, because then when you do the pulls, and you can see I'm pulling up once there, you can trim the top. And if you make sure your rim's tidy, then the rest of your pot, I find, is going to be tidy by the end as well. And actually, I quite like a little bit of a wobble in a pot. There we go. So, as the wheel's spinning, it's making the clay go outwards. So I always throw in a slight inward shape, which counteracts the outward force of the wheel. Otherwise, I kind of lose control of the whole thing. And then what I'm going to do is get this a little bit higher. So you should be able to see there, I'm pushing in at the base, making a little nook for my finger. Keep it wet on the inside. And then I'm going to slowly push that bump up the side of the pot as I hopefully get this looking a bit like a cylinder. Super! So that cylinder is going to become the vase. We're going to use a paintbrush in a minute to carve the vase. But first I'm going to make the collar. So just making sure my rim is nice and neat. Then I'm going to collar in. And from that cylinder I could have also made a mug or a bowl. So while I'm talking you through this throw, my next throws I'll just do maybe in silence, give you a little bit of music. There we go. So now I've got the rough shape of a vase. I'm going to squeeze it in a little bit more there because I always like to finish the top first. So if you top right, then you can cut the base out as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my paintbrush into the water and then I'm going to carve from a horizontal, but slightly at an angle. I'm going to carve the actual vase out. So here we go, that top bit I quite like. I like the bulbousness of it. And then here, hopefully you can see, I'm just applying some pressure on the vase there, pushing in, and I'm actually cutting the clay away, which is what a lot of potters would do in the trimming stage. But with this small wheel, you don't need to trim the pot. If you get it how you want it first time, then you just leave the back to dry and the pot naturally dries off. And then you can pop it in the kiln, or the microwave kiln, which is what I do. Super, so that's starting to look a bit vasey, but actually this paintbrush has got quite a fat end, so I'm going to get a little bit of a sharper cocktail stick. These are not expensive tools, you don't necessarily need the expensive tools to do it. I'm using a cocktail stick, I'm just going to really finesse that base, really cutting in, so that hopefully that bit of clay comes away. That's a nice, hopefully elegant form. You can see I have put a slight wobble into it, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to slow it down, and then with the paintbrush, end of the paintbrush, I'm going to just tickle it. So from base to tip, I'm going to very slowly, allowing it to do a full rotation and keeping it wet every time I move the paintbrush. If you don't do a full rotation, you'll just add an extra wobble back in. And then here, hopefully, I'm going to re-center the pot and also finish that rim. Super! That's one vase. And with the small wheel, what you do now is you turn it off, and you get the back end of the paintbrush, and you can take the bat off and pop that down on here, and then get another bat and start your next row. So I'm going to speed this bit up and show you how many things I can make with this 1 kilogram piece of Potclays sample clay. You can order it in any kind of clay and really experiment and have fun in a more affordable way than if you were buying those giant bags. And speed this bit up. So that's the second thing that I've made with the 1 kilogram bag of clay, and I'm going to take the drip tray off to get this one off because you can leave that off the bats, but I've got it a bit messy there. And that would be big enough for a nice cup of tea, or maybe a mug if I wanted to put a handle on, but I don't really like handles, so I don't often put them on things. So that's 2 pots thrown with the 1 kilogram bag of clay. Let's see how many more we can do. And you just click the drip tray back on. Pop another bat in. There we go. And then, should we do a bowl? Should we go big? shall we do this much clay, which I would say is probably a quarter of the bag. So what's quarter of a kilogram? 250 grams. So let's roll that into a nice ball. Like I said, the clay comes out the bag so nice, I very rarely centre it. I kind of think, centre it? Very rarely wedge it. I kind of think that wedging is actually warming your own body up rather than getting the clay ready. It's kind of getting you ready to wrestle that big ball of clay on the large wheel. Whereas this is such a small, cute wheel that actually the proportion of, or the ratio of human against clay is more in my favour. So, to throw a bowl, all the same steps, just on a larger scale, if you want a big bowl. If you wanted a little salt dipping bowl, you could use a smaller amount of clay. So here we go, let's speed this up. There we go, so that's a bowl. That's the third thing that I've thrown using the 100 grams of clay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this up here and pop the bowl on there so that you can see. And you can see that I've trimmed it on the back, so hopefully once that's dry it will just crack off. And then I've got about half the clay left. So I've done a functional cup just to prove that it's possible. I've done a small bowl and I've done a vase. And now let's do something super duper tiny because I like making jewellery out of my pots. So I'm going to get just a very small bit. So pushing it on there, and you can see I've got very mucky hands now because of the bowl, but I quite like that because it's extra lubrication for the side of the pot. And this pot's going to be so small, I'm going to have to use paintbrushes instead of fingers. So I'll show you how I throw petite on a small pottery wheel. So starting by centering, so top down, as always, in the same way as I did with the mug and the bowl, which were easier for you to see. So I'm probably quite far away now. So we get the unicorn horn shape first, and don't worry if it's really wobbly because then you can just at a 45-degree angle center the top again, and then very slowly push the whole thing down, smoothing the outside as you go. It takes a while to get that, but once you've got it, it just works. There we go. Now we've got the Tunnocks tea cake shape. I'm going to get my paintbrush. I'm going to turn it round. So using the nubby end, I'm going to, at a 45-degree angle, lower the paintbrush. So I'll do that very slowly. So lowering the paintbrush at a 45-degree angle, down, straight down. So this bit's moving down the same speed as the end. Down, 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 to nearly the bottom. And I always say think of a volcano when you do this, because a volcano has the bit that holds all the lava, but you don't want to go all the way down to the base and let the lava out, and that base part will become the bottom of your pot. So now, not looking very vase-like, what we can do next is put the paintbrush on the inside, vertically, so pointing directly up and downsy. Then on the outside, I'm going to push, so with the pointer finger, I'm just going to push, a wet pointer finger, I'm going to push the outside from the base towards the paintbrush. And can you see it's moving towards the paintbrush? It's got a bit wobbly, but don't worry, just keep going. And the reason it won't wobbly there is because I moved too fast. So always remember, just slow down if you need to. There we go. And can you see, as I push, it's getting taller and taller until it's as tall as I want it to be. And then I'm going to very slowly just pull the paintbrush out of the centre. This paintbrush is a bit big now, so I'm going to get a slightly smaller one. And using the slurry from the wheel head, I'm going to polish up to the top and then tickle the rim of the pot. Because if the rim is centred, the rest of the pot will be centred too. So now I'm fairly happy with that, and in my head there's a vase in there. So what I need to do is I need to give it a belly like mine. So in we go, and then we're going to push out where I want the belly to be at an angle. And you should be able to see it growing there, getting a bit fatter, more voluptuous and elegant. And usually when you put the paintbrush in or take the paintbrush out, you're going to create a wobble. So just tickle that rim and remove that wobble. Okay, then when you're happy, you can turn the paintbrush around, use the nubby end, and horizontally, I'm just going to now carve out the pot. So starting with the spout, there, and I'll try and make it so you can see it against my t-shirt. So I can't see it fully, but carving the spout, and working my way down. I want this to be a nice round pot, so just letting that clay move. And then down here, I'm going to cut in and make a bit of a base. Remove the excess clay. And then, let's just check it out. Maybe make it a bit more rounded there. And then it's not very elegant at the moment. It's small, but not elegant. So what I'm going to do is go from base to tip. Just going to work my way up the vase, pushing where I want to apply a bit of pressure to change the shape of the pot. So base, working my way up, and then rounding this bit off. It's looking all right. Then I'm going to put a bit more detail into it and give it a nicer rim. So here I would like there to be a little bump. So I'm going to slowly push that in. There we go, working my way up to the spout. And then maybe let's put a bump here too. And maybe down at the base, we'll just bring that in. That's grand. And then using the slurry here, tickling that base bit, smoothing that bit, and then here where the wobble is. Woo! Right, so that's too wobbly. Let's slow it down. Slow the whole thing down, and then what I'm going to do, get my fingers wet, and I'm just going to bring that back on centre by cradling it. So with 4 points, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock. Took me a moment to figure that out. I'm telling the time my whole life. There we go, and then that should now be a lot more centred. Otherwise I'd have to start again with another 1 kilogram bag of clay. Oh, where would I find that? So then tickling the base, back up to the top, and it's this rim here that I want to finish with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring my thumb in, and we're going to pinch it. So it's flat. And then with the base of the paintbrush, make sure it's as thin as I want before going back in at the 45 degrees. And hopefully you'll see it flatten out in a nice, a slightly more elegant way. Yay! Super, so that's a nice little bulbous pot. Homage to Lee from Pottery Throwdown, his B set, which was perfection. So maybe I'll ask Lee what glaze he used, and I'll use that on this. There we go. So that again can go next to here, and that's number 4. Right, what shall we throw next? Maybe a mini bowl. Pop a bat on. And it goes. Whoop. there's a bowl, that's number 5, and that bowl used a very small amount of clay, so you could probably, with one of these bags, make about 30 or 40 bowls, 30 or 40 mini vases, maybe 40 of these. You could do a whole set of glaze tests, really, and really forward your ceramic knowledge using just one bag of 1 kilogram clay. So, what shall I do next? So now we've done small, off the hump. Let's do a hump. So, here we go. So a hump is exactly that. So it's a hump of clay, and then you throw on the very top of the hump instead of on the back. So we start with our little hill of clay, centre from the top down to get that hill, or hump. There we go, and then once you've got it, then we're just going to use the very top bit of clay as our throwing material. So this part is just helping the top bit spin, and using a paintbrush here, I'm going to start by opening up this top bit. And you can see I've got my thumb just at the back here at 6 o'clock, just making sure everything stays non-wobbly. If it does wobble, just tickle the rim and it will stop. And then, same as I did with the small part, so going in vertically, I'm going to hold the paintbrush, and I'm going to push against the paintbrush with my finger until I can feel this top bit growing. You might not be able to see it, but that's now the cavity that is going to be the inside of my pot. And I always use wooden tools, never plastic, never metal, because they will create suction when you're working on such a small scale. So the suction will throw your pot off constantly. So try wooden if you're having trouble with plastic or metal tools. So now we've got the top bit. I'm just going to keep that rim nice and smooth. I'm essentially going to do a bit of archaeology and find the pot that's inside here using the back of my paintbrush. So, starting at the top, I'll do it so you can see it against my t-shirt. So starting at the top, I'm just going to find that rim, so find the spout. There it is, and then we're going to belly out, and then we're going to find the base in there somewhere, and don't go too fast. If you find the clay fighting against you, take your hands away and then just go back in slowly until you and the clay are working together. That's great, until you've got a tiny, tiny little pot there at the end. Super. I'm going to tickle that, make sure the rim's nice and clean, the side's nice and clean, and then even my small paintbrush here is too big now, so I'm going to use this skewer, and this is just a barbecue skewer, and I'm gonna fan out the rim.
Sorry, this bit's a bit boring. If you can master throwing off the hump, it really shows you lots of different ways of moving clay around. So I recommend giving this a go and putting it as a thing on your to-do list.
The flute, and then coming round, carve it to the shape I want. Then I'm going to get a paintbrush again and just using the
This is actually how I started small throwing. On Pottery Throwdown, I had to make a dinner service. Throwing off the hump, I did it on a big wheel, but we threw things just as small as this.
And just make sure everything's nice and smooth how I want it to be. Super. That's great. And then, using the motion of the wheel and the end of this skewer, which you can see if it's not got clay on it, is very pointy. And then going to slow the wheel down. No, that's speeding up. Slow it down lots. And then cut the base of the pot. And as I do that, you can see I'm going in with my fingers. I've pinched it. I've got the pot here in my fingers, not squeezing too hard. And that's going to go and dry just here. Then, when it's dried, I'm going to rub the base, and that will be the trimming. So that will just take any mess off the base of this tiny, tiny pot. Then I've got the hump. So then you can throw another one on the hump here if you wanted, by just recentering the top, and then that could be another vase. So really, with this bit, you could probably throw 30 or 40, but that'll be a bit boring for you to watch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the hump to throw something else. In we go. There we go. So that's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Pop that over on this side to try and all balance it out. There we go. We've got this one just here. And then that was quite fun using the gouge tool. So maybe if I smush the very last bit of my 1 kilogram ball of clay together, pop a bat on. If I pop a bat on. So then using the last bit of my 1 kilogram ball of clay, I'm going to show you again with the Garrity tool how I would throw the mug. So onto the bat goes the clay, bit of water, and we're going to start by centering top down. So if we get that top bit centered, and then work our way slowly down the outside of the pot. Ooh, wobbly wobbly, but getting less wobbly. And then do that again, so top down. And then toothpaste squeeze. So squeezing the clay. So I'm not pushing, I'm not pulling. It's called pulling, but I'm squeezing the base bit here. Oh, squeeze, 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 so that it goes up. And I'll do this in a bit of an exaggerated way, so you can kind of see this base is going up, and then I'm just going to smooth around the outside up to the tip till the tip feels centered. That's great. And then one more. That's great. So then when you pull, I'll show you again. So squeezing the base, you should see this form now growing. It's growing slightly wobbly because I'm pushing harder at one point. So if I push hard there, oh, wobble. We don't want it wobbly. So then when I come down, I'm going to be relaxed and calm and just smooth it down to the base, like I'm on a spaceship landing a little bit. So going down, directly down, centering that top bit, then smoothing my way around from the point at the top. So this top bit centered, smoothing my way down. And in, and then don't worry about a wobble. Do it one more time. So smoothing my way top, down, until it slightly gets a bit more centered. So getting there slowly, but what I usually do is the unicorn horns. So let's do that. So squeezing here, you're going to carry on squeezing all the way to the tip. All the way. Don't worry about this. Look, it's gone a bit crazy. Whoa, don't worry. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Hopefully it's buckled a bit. So can you see there's a slight wobble in it here? That's a spiral, and I actually think that that strengthens your pot, especially when you start to throw bigger things. One day you'll be throwing something massive. So don't worry about the spiral, just worry about the symmetricality. So I don't know if that's a word. So this, not symmetrical. You want it to have sides that are the same, because then your bowl will have sides that are the same. So to do that, I use this crazy out of control structure. Use my arm, center it back on into the center, as if there's a magical rod coming down here. And then I'm going to slide down that, pushing down into the wheel, Might need to speed it up a bit. So you can see it's now collapsing on itself, and it will keep going to match the form of my hand. So if my hand's like this, cupped on here, then that's going to be a symmetrical representation of the inside of my hand. A bit like when you were little and you had those things you put plasticine in and then squeezed it down and then like a star would poop out. That's essentially what I'm doing here, but in a spinning way. And there that should be a centered ball of clay that I can then make a cup out of. So not a cup like this, we're going to make a larger cup a bit like this. So then fingering in, 45-degree angle, I'm anchored to the wheel, going in, and I'm pushing down, and then I'm so excited I'm going to pull my hand away really fast, and then there's a wobble in it. I always throw my pots off, always. Even if I get it perfectly centered at the beginning, I always throw it off center at another point of the throwing stage. Do not panic. On throwdown, I realised I do not have time to worry about centering. I was not the best potter there. I was probably the worst potter there in terms of throwing. So Sally very wisely told me, don't stress, just get the finished product. And there's so many ways to center a pot. So here, you can see now what I've done is I've anchored myself to the wheel and I'm just cupping it until that wobble disappears. And I'm allowing it to spin a whole spin each time before I move, and that's just smoothing it. So hopefully it looks centered again. Super. And then we'll pull up again. And if it gets off-centered again, I'll do the exact same thing again. So squeezing the toothpaste, I'm going to squeeze at the base here. And I'm going to pull that up. I'm going to do it one-handed so you can see the clay moving and the wobbles, because I'm not anchored now, so my arm's not anchored to the pot. The clay is in control of me. It's going to go wobbly, but I'll show you how to unwobble that again. There we go. Ooh, keep the rim clean. Super. So that's got a slight wobble to it. That's because I wasn't anchored. My elbow's up in the air, it's shaking around. So now, get it nice and wet, I'm going to anchor. So pretend you've got heavy watches, or anchor yourself to something. On the small wheel I use the bat here. You just have to be anchored at one point. And look, I'm leaning my thumb on the drip tray there, is how I would naturally do it. And then I'm just going to poop out that Play-Doh one bit at a time until it is nice and smooth. And not wobbly. He hopes. Yay! So that's becoming a cylinder, but I've actually got a very thin top and I've got a lot of clay down here at the base. So I'm going to do one more pull and hopefully you'll see this move up. It's the thing that all the fancy schmancy potters love doing, but really it's just moving the clay. So down here, I'm going to move this clay. And I'm moving it, the way I'm moving it is by squeezing my fingers in down here so the clay has no choice but to go up. A bit like squeezing out a splinter, and you need to keep the outside nice and lubricated because if it snags you feel the wobble happen. There we go, and I'm going to go all the way up. So that's grown now as a cup, but what we want to do is put some wobbly wobbles in it. It's our last bit of 1 kilogram clay from Potclays. So we want it to look cool. So let's use the big bubble. No, let's use the small bubble because then you'll see it's similar to that one. Super, so dipping that in the water, because you do it with your hands, so why don't you do it with your tools? And then rather than going in completely parallel, I'll let it go like a door. So it'd be harder to run through a flat door, you'd just face palm. If the door was slightly ajar, it'd be easier to go through. So it's going to be easier for the clay as well. So holding it like this, and then going to start from the base. I'm just going to slowly push against the wooden tool. And hopefully on your side you should see the bubbles appearing. And I'm pulling it away. Yay! Super. Now clean the rim.
So here you can see a wobble still in the rim of the pot from when I didn't centre it properly earlier, or I threw it off at some point in the throwing process. Now what I'm going to do is very slowly and quite robotically get rid of that wobble.
And then with the pointy tool.
But first we need to expose it, and this is how I do it. Trimming the base is always going to push some clay up, and it will push the wobble up the most. So this is a great way to expose it while getting the base how you want it.
Slowing it down, I can see there is a big wobble in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold my inside finger in until it's holding really still and applying a little bit of pressure where the wobble is.
Because if you think of the wobble like a Mexican wave, you're high-fiving all the people at the top to put their hands down, and you're making it nice and level. That's how I think about it anyway. And here you can see, hopefully, the base is now fairly wobble-free, and now the top is too.
That is the last of the 1 kilogram. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pots of all different sizes. And if I wanted to, I could have made hundreds of tiny ones. I could have made 4 or 5 large ones. I could make probably half a dozen cups. And then I'll have learnt loads. I'll have known the clay better. So I'll know if it's a clay that I want to buy more of, or if I want to try a different clay. This was a lovely smooth clay. It was just the first bag that I picked up. But I'll do some more throws with other clays. Black Vulcan's very cool. A grogged clay is very nice. They give different colours when they're fired. They also affect the glaze differently. So the same glaze will look different on each of these bags of clay. So when you see someone firing something amazing and you're like, wow, I want to do that, you try it and it comes out totally different. That could be because your clay and the firing temperature are slightly different. So, which one will you buy from Potclays? I've got all of them. I think if you bought a porcelain, a stoneware, an earthenware, a grogged clay and a smooth clay, you would have really good fun in trying them all, and then you could even mix them together. And I did notice one of these is an air dry clay, so you could even get air dry clay from Potclays too. Can't wait to see what you make. Hopefully I'll have some more videos up of what I make next.